were like locking arms in front of the place and, doing civil disobedience. And I remember seeing the secretaries walk out of the building for lunch. And so we did this skit, this kind of drag skit about the U.S. embargo on Nicaragua. And then one secretary was like, what's going on over there? She did a double take and she like grabbed the elbows of a few other secretaries and brought them over, and they started watching us. And I was like, yes, we've got the secretaries. And the elbow grabber, the head secretary, said, I just want to say thanks. I want you to know that a few weeks ago, my best friend from high school died of AIDS, and he would have really loved this. And so it means so much to me that you're doing it. I'll never forget this feeling of connection I had with this woman. And this woman who, shame on me, I thought I had nothing in common with. And this silly skit had brought us together. And I think of that as the first day of the theater offensive.
So we know that queer people have always been part of Boston's community. Queer people have been part of the history of this area since before the colonizers landed.
Back in 1985, a bunch of radical gay men got together and started doing activism together, and we called ourselves United Fruit Company. It was really a desperate, scary moment. Our circle of friends was dying. People were dropping like flies from AIDS. United Fruit Company was really specifically for gay men. And we wanted to work with more women, more trans folks, and more people of color than were in this affinity group. So that was one of the big reasons to start the theater offensive. One of the things that we did that I thought was really important was that when we brought folks in from out of town, they led workshops for local artists. They were always saying to us, like, wow, this is unique. There's not like a theater offensive type organization in every city. This is the only one.
Some of the most powerful moments in Boston's queer history include 1974, when the Combahee River Collective was formed, a group that was predominantly Black queer women looking to define their own politics and have their own organization. The creation of Gay Community News in 1973, one of the first national gay newspapers in the country started here in Boston. Later on, in 1989, we're the second state to pass a gay rights bill to support the community, and later on, explicit protections for trans people are added to that bill. There's a ton of queer history here in Boston and organizations that paved the way and continue to pave the way, including the Theater Offensive.
Right then at the beginning in 1989 and 90, we worked with the AIDS Action Committee to conceive a way of using guerrilla theater in the Fens to encourage safe sex there. And it was a really powerful project.
When the Theater Offensive is founded, it's happening at the same time as a lot of youth queer organizing and activism. And then you see the Theater Offensive that is allowing and empowering queer youth to perform and to become part of this activism through their artwork.
There was a call for proposals from the Massachusetts Department of Education to support their Safe Schools program with a theater project. And that year in 1994, we started the True Colors Out Youth Theater with a project at the Cambridge Ringe and Latin High School.
In the 2000s, you see groups like the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition picking up the idea of having conferences and meetings and really conventions for, in particular, queer and trans youth of color to come together to learn about their history, to learn about the community, and then to go forth into the world and make changes. The Theater Offensive is part of that lineage.
I think what we're doing now feels really reminiscent of where we started. in 1989, it might have been a pop-up performance on the street where we gathered queer people to talk about whatever the most pressing issues were, whether it was the AIDS epidemic or any other thing that was kind of an attack on queer and trans bodies. Now we can meet those people online. So we can still do this kind of like guerrilla kind of pop-up and sensational fun kind of thing, but now we're popping up online and we're spreading a much wider net than just that local community that might ripple out via word of mouth.
And now we've, launched a residency program, and, we've worked with a number of artists over the years and brought their work from initial stages into production stages, and actually been able to sort of send some of these productions to other places.
No matter if you are a youth or if you are an adult in our programming. We have mutual aid because we believe that it is a core resource to navigating this world at the intersections of being a person of color and of being queer. There are factors, systematic factors in this world that keeps us from doing the art. With having mutual aid, what we do is say, hey, we see that, we identify that, and we understand that. And what we're gonna do is give you a resource so that you can hopefully be rest easy on this side. Therefore, you can focus on thriving and you can focus on joy and this artistry moving forward.
Our approach is more so, well, what does the community need? Like, I know that in most of the meetings that we have, the first thing we think about is, well, what is the impact? How are people gonna receive this? What do we want them to feel? What is the goal? I would say that that's definitely the through line. It's just meeting the people where they are.
Boston goes from having literally dozens of queer bars and venues to the 5 or 6 that we have now, which included the 1270, which was a bar, Machine and Ramrod, which were also bars, but also served as places for the community to meet, to gather, maybe to drink, but also to watch performances, including drag, theater productions, and musicians.
In the city of Boston, we've had multiple space issues happening at the same time. On the one hand, we've been losing queer spaces, queer nightlife spaces, not just in the city, but in greater Boston. And then on the other hand, we've been losing performing arts spaces, music venues, spaces for that artistic presentation. So when the city found out in 2019 that Machine was closing, we knew that we had to do something to address that. And when we realized that a developer was coming in to that space and creating a project there, we realized it was a great opportunity to talk to them and see if they'd be willing to recreate some kind of queer space to make sure that that stayed in the community and stayed in the city of Boston. And the theater offensive came up right away in many of our minds in City Hall because of their long history, over 30 years working with the LGBTQ community, and all of their work centering artists and young people, and it just really felt like that was the organization that needed to be in that space, and really thinking about how to address this problem of not having queer spaces in the city of Boston and losing them.
A queer future to me looks like being able to be in community, being able to take care of each other.
The theater offensive and this historic moment where they are building a new theater that is going to be the largest theater owned and operated by queer and trans people of color is an enormous moment in Boston's history, but is also part of this lineage of activists, and in particular organizations run by queer and trans people of color who have continued to move the movement forward, to keep that momentum going. And now the theater offensive gets to take it to the next level with this new space.
I think what's possible is making Boston a destination for people to see as like a safe place for queer people to come. I think it's really important for QT-POC folk to take up space, celebrate joy in the face of oppression, because it's one of those things that just shows up out of nowhere. It's like all of a sudden you realize you're different, and that difference is not a good thing. And so I think that the taking up space in a physical way is kind of a reclamation of the emotional space, and all these other spaces that kind of get demonized when you're labeled as other.
Joy and thriving don't really get modeled for us. So how do we know how to do it if it's never been modeled, right? So the importance of it in the now and in today is that it unlocks a different side of our story, not only for us to learn by doing, but also for Gen Z, the future generations that are coming up after us, to say, hey, that future where I see those people smiling, where I see those people living, where I see those people with gray hair aging, right, is a future that is accessible to me because they've showed me how.
I want to pass on this legacy of determination and creativity, but I want a queer future that can let go of the desperation, that can bathe in queer joy and love the hard parts of our past without getting stuck in them.
Keeping the work of organizations like the Theater Offensive in mind make me hopeful that the next generation is going to pick up the banner, pick up the beacon, and make sure that we never go back into the closet.
A queer future has got to be land back. We really got to start with space, y'all.
Where it's less chaos, but more harmony.
A future where people are free to be themselves, where queerness is tied to one's own self-identity.
I would say one where safety was never in question, where joy is first. Anything except fear is first. That's a queer future for me.
A queer future to me breaks down the things that we see as barriers in this field.
Where you can walk into a space and feel confident in who you are and not feel that there's any judgment on you, and that you really are free to be yourself.
Queer Republic is all about that, knowing that you are home wherever you are because you bring and make home with you. We are the arts in a QT POC, largest theater ever built, baby.